Captain Sarah Chen had seen many strange things during her 15 years aboard the interstellar research vessel Horizon's Edge, but nothing quite like this. The young Zolani girl couldn't be more than 16 in human years, her translucent blue skin shimmering under the harsh lights of the interrogation room. Her large, violet eyes were filled with tears that seemed to glow faintly in the dim space. The girl sat across from Sarah, her delicate hands bound with energy restraints that hummed softly. Behind her stood two towering Corvan guards, their reptilian faces expressionless beneath their ceremonial armor. The rest of the diplomatic assembly watched from behind reinforced glass, representatives from 12 different species, all here to witness what the Galactic Council called a matter of unprecedented importance. Sarah studied the alien girl carefully. The Zolani were known throughout the galaxy for their peaceful nature and advanced healing abilities. They rarely left their homeworld, and, when they did, it was usually for humanitarian missions. What could this child have possibly done to warrant such a dramatic scene? "State your name and origin," Commander Vex of the Corvan Empire demanded, his voice echoing through the universal translator with mechanical precision. The girl's voice was barely a whisper. "My name is Lirana of the Southern Crystalline Colonies, daughter of Healer HFY." She lifted her head slightly, and Sarah noticed something that made her heart skip a beat. The girl wasn't just looking around the room randomly, she was specifically searching for something. Or someone. "You stand accused of violating 17 interspecies treaties, including the Forbidden Knowledge Accords and the Prime Directive of Non-Interference," Vex continued. "How do you plead?" But Lirana wasn't paying attention to the Corvan commander. Her eyes had found Sarah, and she was staring at her with an intensity that made the human captain uncomfortable. There was something desperate in that gaze, something that spoke of hope hanging by the thinnest of threads. "I need to speak with the human," Lirana said suddenly, her voice cutting through the formal proceedings like a blade. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Ambassador Thelquin of the Ethereal Collective raised his forearms in protest. "This is highly irregular. The accused cannot simply demand an audience with, please," Lirana interrupted, and now the tears were flowing freely down her cheeks. "I need to speak with the human. It's important. More important than you could possibly understand." Sarah felt every eye in the room turn toward her. As the only human representative present, she was already an oddity in this gathering. Humans were still relatively new to the galactic community, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 50 years ago. Most species viewed them with a mixture of curiosity and caution. Captain Chen, the voice of High Arbitrator Morkath, resonated through the chamber's speakers. The ancient being's form was hidden behind layers of ceremonial robes, but Sarah could feel the weight of millennia behind those words. "As the human representative, do you consent to hear what this young Zolani has to say?" Sarah looked at Lirana again. The girl's hands were trembling now, and she was barely holding back sobs. Whatever she wanted to discuss, it was eating her alive from the inside. "I consent," Sarah said, standing from her observer's chair. "But I want to know what she's accused of first." Commander Vex's serpentine tongue flicked out, and what Sarah had learned was a sign of annoyance. The accused infiltrated a Class 5 restricted research facility on the moon Zirion 7. She accessed confidential data regarding human physiology and psychological profiles. When confronted by security forces, she made statements that violated multiple treaties regarding species classification and protection protocols. "What kind of statements?" Sarah asked, though she was already walking toward the center of the chamber where Lirana sat. "That is classified until the hearing concludes," High Arbitrator Morkath replied. "However, given the unusual nature of her request, we will permit a brief conference. All recording devices will remain active, and the conversation will be monitored by this assembly." Sarah reached the small table where Lirana sat. Up close, she could see that the alien girl was even younger than she'd initially thought. Her skin had the soft luminescence that marked adolescence among the Zolani, and her eyes held that peculiar mixture of wisdom and innocence that seemed common to her species. "What did you want to tell me?" Sarah asked gently, pulling up a chair across from the girl. Lirana looked around the room one more time, as if gathering courage from somewhere deep inside herself. When she finally spoke, her words were so quiet that Sarah had to lean forward to hear them. "I need to know if it's true," Lirana whispered. "What I found in those files. About humans. About what you really are. Sarah frowned. What do you mean? What did the file say? Lyrana's next words sent a chill down Sarah's spine. The file said that humans aren't just another species. They said you're something else entirely. Something that should be impossible according to everything we know about evolution and biology. The room had gone completely silent. Even the background hum of the ship's systems seemed muted. Sarah could feel the weight of dozens of eyes upon her, representatives from species she'd worked alongside for years, all waiting for her response. I don't understand, Sarah said carefully. Humans are just humans. We evolved on Earth like any other species evolved on their homeworlds. But, Lyrana was shaking her head frantically. No, that's not what the files said. They contained research from the ancestor archives, studies that go back millions of years. Sarah, the files said that humans aren't from Earth originally. They said you're the descendants of something called the First Ones, a species that was so advanced they could travel between galaxies before the rest of us had even developed language. The silence that followed was so profound that Sarah could hear her own heartbeat. She looked around the room and saw that several of the alien representatives had gone very still. A few were exchanging glances that seemed loaded with meaning. That's impossible, Sarah said, but her voice sounded weak even to her own ears. Humans have fossil records going back millions of years on Earth. We have clear evolutionary lineages. Planted evidence, Lyrana said desperately. According to the research, it was all carefully constructed to hide the truth. The first ones didn't just disappear, they scattered themselves across the galaxy, hiding their true nature even from their own descendants. They made themselves forget who they were to protect the younger species from something terrible that was coming. Sarah's mind was reeling. This was beyond anything she'd ever heard, even in the wildest science fiction stories from her childhood. But, looking at Lyrana's face, she could see that the girl believed every word she was saying. Why are you telling me this? Sarah asked. And, why was it so important that you talked to a human specifically? Lyrana's eyes filled with fresh tears. Because my people are dying, Sarah. All of our healing abilities, all of our advanced medicine, nothing can stop what's happening to us. But, the research said that humans might still carry some genetic memory of the first one's technology. Hidden deep in your DNA, dormant but still there. She leaned forward, her voice becoming urgent. My little brother is sick, Sarah. The plague that's killing my people started with the children, and it's spreading faster than we can contain it. The doctors say he has maybe weeks left. Months if we're lucky. The desperation in her voice was heartbreaking, but Sarah still couldn't process what she was being told. Even if what you're saying is true, and I'm not saying it is, I wouldn't know how to access any kind of genetic memory. I'm just a starship captain. But, you could try, Lyrana pleaded. You could help us research it. The files mention specific techniques, ways to unlock dormant genetic sequences. Please, Sarah. I know it sounds crazy, I know it goes against everything we've been taught about galactic history, but what if it's real? What if you really are the key to saving my people? Before Sarah could respond, Commander Vex's voice boomed across the chamber. Enough of this nonsense. The accused has clearly been affected by classified disinformation. High Arbitrator, I move that we conclude this hearing immediately and proceed with sentencing. But, High Arbitrator Morketha's response surprised everyone. Commander Vex, tell me, in your honest opinion, did those research files contain disinformation? The Corvin's pause was telling. The files contained classified information that is not to be discussed in open forum. That's not what I asked, Morketh pressed. I asked if the information was false. Another pause. The information has not been proven false, no. The chamber erupted in shocked voices from multiple species. Sarah felt as if the ground had shifted beneath her feet. She looked at Lyrana, who was watching her with such hope and desperation that it physically hurt to see. There's more, Lyrana said quickly, taking advantage of the chaos. The files mention something called the Return Protocol, a failsafe the first ones built into their descendants. When activated, it's supposed to restore their full technological and biological capabilities. How? Sarah asked, despite herself. A specific sequence of genetic triggers, activated through exposure to certain energy patterns and psychological stimuli. The research team on Zirion 7 had identified several potential candidates among the human population, people whose genetic markers suggested they might be the most likely to carry uncorrupted first one DNA. Sarah's blood ran cold. And your name was at the top of the list, Sarah. According to their analysis, you have the highest probability of any living human to successfully undergo the return protocol activation. The noise in the chamber had died down, and Sarah realized that everyone was staring at her again. The weight of their attention felt crushing, but, more than that, she was struggling with the implications of what Lyrana had just told her. Even if this is all true, Sarah said slowly, even if humans really are the descendants of these first ones, activating some kind of genetic protocol sounds incredibly dangerous. What if it goes wrong? What if it changes me into something that isn't human anymore? Lyrana's voice broke as she responded. I know it's a lot to ask. I know it's dangerous and terrifying and probably impossible. But, Sarah, my brother is 8 years old. He loves to paint pictures of the crystal gardens near our home, and he makes up songs about the things he sees in the clouds. 3 weeks ago, he was running and playing with his friends. Now he can barely lift his head from his pillow. She took a shuddering breath. The plague has already killed thousands of children across our colonies. Our best healers, our most advanced medical technology, none of it can even slow it down. But, if there's even a chance that you could help us, if there's even the smallest possibility that the old stories are true and humans really do carry the power of the first ones. She looked directly into Sarah's eyes. I'm not asking you to decide right now. I'm just asking you to consider it. To look at the research and see if there might be something there. Because if you can't help us, if the first one technology really is lost forever, then my little brother is going to die. And so are thousands of other children just like him. The chamber had gone silent again, but this time the quiet felt different. Less shocked, more contemplative. Sarah could sense that the other representatives were thinking, processing what they'd just heard. Some of them looked skeptical, but others seemed troubled, as if they were remembering things they'd tried to forget. High Arbitrator, Sarah said finally, I request permission to review the research files that the accused accessed. If there's even a possibility that this information could help save lives, don't we have an obligation to investigate it? Captain Chen, Ambassador Thelquin interjected, surely you cannot be seriously considering this wild tale. The genetic lineage of every spacefaring species has been thoroughly documented. The idea that humans are somehow different, somehow more than what they appear to be, contradicts centuries of established scientific consensus. But, it was High Arbitrator Morketh who provided the most unsettling response. Actually, Ambassador, the genetic lineage documentation you refer to has some notable gaps. Particularly regarding human origins. Despite extensive research, there remain several unexplained anomalies in human DNA that don't follow standard evolutionary patterns. Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. What kind of anomalies? Genetic sequences that appear to serve no current biological function, but which are far too complex and structured to be random mutations. Dormant neural pathways that seem designed for capabilities that modern humans don't possess. And, most puzzling of all, genetic markers that suggest human DNA has been artificially stabilized against degradation over timescales that should be impossible for a naturally evolved species. The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. She looked at Lyrana, whose eyes were shining with hope and desperation in equal measure. The research is real, isn't it? Sarah asked quietly. High Arbitrator Morketh's response was careful but telling. The research exists. Whether its conclusions are accurate remains to be determined. But, given the current crisis facing the Zilani people, and the potential implications for galactic security, the Council has already voted to declassify the relevant files. Sarah's mind was spinning. Everything she thought she knew about human history, about her own species' place in the galaxy, was being turned upside down. But, beneath the confusion and fear, she felt something else stirring, a strange sense of recognition, as if some deep part of her was remembering something it had forgotten long ago. If I agree to this, she said slowly, if I agree to look at the research and maybe even try this return protocol activation, what happens to Lyrana? The charges against her would be dropped, Commander Vex said reluctantly. Her actions, while technically illegal, were motivated by humanitarian concerns. If a human volunteer agrees to participate in the research, the Council would consider her debt to galactic law satisfied. Sarah looked at Lyrana one more time. The alien girl was holding her breath, waiting for an answer that could mean the difference between hope and despair for her people. "I'll do it," Sarah said. "I'll review the research and consider attempting the activation. But I want full disclosure about the risks, and I want the best medical team the galaxy can provide standing by in case something goes wrong." The relief that washed over Lyrana's face was so profound that Sarah felt tears forming in her own eyes. The alien girl nodded frantically, unable to speak through her sobs of gratitude. But, even as Sarah committed to this path, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was about to discover something that would change not just her own life, but the entire balance of power in the galaxy. The research files might hold the key to saving the Zilani children, but they might also contain secrets that some beings would kill to protect. The research facility on Station Kepler 9 was unlike anything Sarah had ever seen. Built into a hollow asteroid at the edge of the neutral zone, it represented the combined scientific capabilities of 7 different species. The corridors were wide enough to accommodate the massive thorac delegates, while specialized environmental controls maintained perfect atmospheric conditions for everyone from the methane-breathing Kythera to the crystalline Vexhi. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the lead human xenobiologist, met Sarah at the main airlock. Her old friend looked exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes and worry lines that hadn't been there when they'd served together on the Meridian 5 years ago. "Sarah, I have to be honest with you," Elena said as they walked toward the main research labs. "When the Council contacted me about this project, I thought they'd all lost their minds. But, after 3 weeks of studying these files..." She paused at a security checkpoint, allowing a scanner to verify her biometrics. "Everything we thought we knew about human evolution is wrong. Not just a little wrong, completely, fundamentally wrong." They entered a vast laboratory where dozens of scientists from various species were hunched over holographic displays and exotic scanning equipment. At the center of the room stood a device that made Sarah's breath catch in her throat. It looked almost organic, like a tree made of crystalline metal with branches that pulsed with soft, multicolored light. "Is that..." Sarah began. "The activation chamber," Elena confirmed. "We built it according to specifications found in the deepest levels of the research data. The design principles are so advanced that half our engineers think it shouldn't be possible for it to work. But preliminary tests suggested some kind of quantum resonance amplifier that can interface directly with human neural tissue." They approached a group of beings clustered around a massive holographic display showing what appeared to be a complex genetic map. Sarah recognized Dr. Kethmore, the renowned Zilani geneticist whose healing research had saved billions of lives across the galaxy. Standing beside him was someone Sarah hadn't expected to see, Admiral Harrison of the Earth Defense Fleet. "Admiral," Sarah said, surprised. "I wasn't aware that Earth Command was involved in this project." Harrison's expression was grim. "Neither was I until 48 hours ago. That's when our deep space monitoring stations detected something that changed everything." He gestured to the holographic display, which shifted to show what looked like a star map. 3 days ago, long-range sensors picked up this. A section of the map highlighted in red, showing several star systems on the far edge of the galaxy. "What am I looking at?" Sarah asked. "Energy signatures unlike anything we've ever recorded," Dr. Kethmore replied in his melodious Zilani accent. "The patterns match theoretical models for technologies that shouldn't exist: faster-than-light communication across galactic distances, matter manipulation on a stellar scale, and what appears to be dimensional barrier manipulation." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "Who's responsible for those signatures?" "That's the problem," Admiral Harrison said. "We don't know." The signatures appeared simultaneously across 17 different star systems, all of them in regions that long-range surveys have classified as uninhabited for millions of years. Elena pulled up another display showing detailed genetic sequences. "But here's the terrifying part, Sarah. When we analyzed the energy patterns using algorithms from the first one research, we found correlations. Whatever's generating those signatures is using technology that matches the theoretical capabilities described in the ancient files. You think the first ones are returning? Sarah asked. Or something that has their technology, Dr. Kethmore said quietly. Which brings us to why your participation in this project has become critical not just for saving the Zilani children, but, potentially for the survival of every species in the galaxy. Admiral Harrison activated another section of the display. We've run projections based on the expansion pattern of those energy signatures. If they continue at their current rate, whatever's generating them will reach the core worlds within 6 months. The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. She looked around the laboratory at the various beings working frantically at their stations, and, suddenly, understood the urgency that seemed to permeate the entire facility. You think activating the return protocol might give us access to first one technology that could defend against whatever this is, she said. It's our best hope, Elena confirmed. The research suggests that the genetic locks in human DNA aren't just random evolutionary artifacts. They're specifically designed to preserve technological knowledge and capabilities. Knowledge that the original first ones might have hidden for exactly this kind of situation. A new voice joined the conversation, one that made Sarah turn in surprise. Lirana was approaching, no longer dressed in the simple robes of an accused criminal but, in the complex ceremonial garments of a Zilani researcher. Lirana? What are you doing here? Dr. Kethmore requested my assistance, the young alien replied. It turns out that the files I accessed contain more than just historical research. There were also detailed protocols for the activation process, including psychological preparation techniques that only someone with Zilani empathic abilities can properly administer. Sarah looked between Lirana and Dr. Kethmore. Empathic abilities? What does that have to do with genetic activation? Everything, Dr. Kethmore explained. The return protocol isn't just about unlocking dormant DNA. According to the research, the process requires precise emotional and psychological states to be maintained during activation. The human subject must achieve a specific mental resonance that allows the genetic locks to recognize them as a legitimate inheritor of first one capabilities. Elena brought up a detailed brain scan on one of the displays. We've been studying human neural patterns for weeks, Sarah. Your brain shows several unique characteristics that make you an ideal candidate. But, more importantly, you demonstrate emotional resilience patterns that suggest you could maintain psychological stability during the transformation. Transformation? Sarah asked, not liking the sound of that word. The activation process doesn't just unlock genetic memories, Lirana explained gently. It fundamentally alters human physiology and cognitive capacity. According to the research, successful subjects develop enhanced intelligence, expanded sensory perception, and access to what the files call quantum consciousness, the ability to directly interface with advanced technology through thought alone. Admiral Harrison stepped closer to Sarah. Captain, I'm not going to lie to you about the risks. The research suggests that roughly 30% of activation attempts result in complete psychological breakdown. Another 20% cause severe physiological complications that could be fatal. Sarah felt her mouth go dry. And the other 50%? Become something that's no longer entirely human, Elena said quietly. But also something with the power to potentially save every living being in this galaxy. The weight of the decision was crushing. Sarah looked around the laboratory again, taking in the desperate urgency of the research teams, the sophisticated equipment that represented the best scientific capabilities of multiple species, and the faces of beings who were quite literally betting their civilization's survival on her willingness to undergo an experimental procedure that might kill or fundamentally change her. How long do I have to decide? She asked. The energy signatures are accelerating, Admiral Harrison replied. Our latest projections suggest we have perhaps 4 weeks before whatever's generating them reaches the point where defensive preparations become meaningless. The activation process itself takes approximately 72 hours, followed by several days of recovery and capability testing. Dr. Kethmore moved closer, his large violet eyes filled with the same desperate hope that Sarah had seen in Lirana's face back in the hearing chamber. Captain Shen, I must also tell you that the plague affecting our children is spreading faster than we initially projected. We've lost 300 young ones in the past week alone. But, if the activation works, Lirana added, if you successfully access first one genetic memories, the research suggests you would gain instant knowledge of medical techniques that could cure not just our plague, but diseases that have puzzled galactic medicine for centuries. Sarah closed her eyes, trying to process everything she'd learned. When she opened them again, she found herself looking directly at the activation chamber. Up close, she could see that its crystalline surfaces were covered with incredibly intricate patterns that seemed to shift and move when she wasn't looking directly at them. "Can I speak with some of the other research team leaders?" she asked. "I want to understand exactly what this process involves before I make my final decision." Over the next several hours, Sarah was briefed by experts from every major species in the galactic community. The Thorac engineers explained the quantum resonance principles that made the activation chamber function. The Kythera psychologists described the mental preparation techniques that would help her maintain psychological stability during the transformation. The ethereal collective's historians shared what they knew about First One civilization from their most ancient records. But it was a conversation with Dr. Yexai, a crystalline being whose species had been studying consciousness for millions of years, that finally helped Sarah understand what she was truly being asked to do. The return protocol is not just about becoming more than human, Dr. Yexai explained through harmonic vibrations that the universal translator converted into words. It is about accepting responsibility for knowledge and power that your species' ancestors chose to abandon. The first ones did not disappear randomly. They made a conscious choice to limit themselves, to forget their capabilities, because they had learned that such power corrupts even the most well-intentioned beings. Then, why would they create a way to restore that power? Sarah asked. Because they also understood that there are threats in the universe that cannot be faced without it. The energy signatures we detected are not random phenomena. They match patterns described in the oldest First One warnings, signatures of beings called the Devourers, entities from beyond our galaxy who consume entire civilizations and add their technological capabilities to their own collective. The revelation hit Sarah like a lightning bolt. The First Ones fought these Devourers before? And lost, Dr. Yexai confirmed. That is why they scattered themselves across the galaxy and hid their technology within their own descendants. They knew the Devourers would return eventually, and, when they did, the galaxy would need champions who could access First One capabilities but who had been raised with the values and experiences of the younger species. Sarah felt pieces of a cosmic puzzle clicking into place. So the return protocol isn't just about unlocking genetic memories. It's about creating beings who can use First One technology while retaining the moral perspectives that the original First Ones had lost. Precisely. And, according to our analysis, humans possess the psychological flexibility and emotional resilience necessary to maintain their core ethical principles even after transformation. It is why the First Ones chose your species as their primary inheritors. That evening, Sarah found herself alone in her quarters, staring out at the star field beyond station Kepler 9. The weight of the decision before her felt almost unbearable. She was being asked to potentially sacrifice her humanity to save not just the Zilani children, but possibly every living being in the galaxy. A soft chime announced a visitor. The door slid open to reveal Lirana, carrying a small holographic projector. "I hope I'm not disturbing you," the young Zilani said. "I wanted to show you something." She activated the projector, and, suddenly, Sarah's quarters were filled with images of Zilani children playing in crystal gardens under the light of binary suns. The pictures were beautiful beyond description, showing young beings with translucent skin that caught and reflected light in rainbow patterns as they laughed and ran and explored their shimmering world. "These were taken before the plague began," Lirana said softly. "This is my brother Catherine, and these are his friends." One image showed a small Zilani boy with particularly bright violet eyes, painting a picture of what looked like a dragon made of living starlight. His concentration was absolute, and his face radiated the kind of pure joy that only children could achieve. "The doctors say he probably won't live to see his next birthday," Lirana continued, her voice breaking slightly. "But, if the return protocol works, if you can access the medical knowledge of the First Ones." She activated another sequence of images, showing the same crystal gardens but now filled with healthy children whose skin pulsed with vibrant light as they played games that seemed to involve manipulating pure energy with their thoughts. "This is what we're fighting for, Sarah." Not just survival, but the chance for these children to grow up in a universe where beings like the Devourers cannot snuff out entire civilizations on a whim. Sarah watched the holographic children playing, and felt something deep inside her soul make the decision that her mind had been struggling with. These children deserved to live. Every child in the galaxy deserved to grow up free from the threat of cosmic predators who viewed entire species as nothing more than resources to be consumed. "I'll do it," she said quietly. "I'll undergo the return protocol activation." Lyrana's relief was so intense that it was almost painful to witness. She started to thank Sarah, but the human captain held up a hand to stop her. "But I have conditions. First, I want complete medical monitoring throughout the process, with protocols in place to abort the activation if things go wrong. Second, I want psychological support teams standing by to help me maintain my sense of self during the transformation. And third, I want promises from every species represented here that if this works, if I successfully access First One capabilities, the knowledge will be shared with everyone, not hoarded by any single government or organization." "Done," Lyrana said immediately. "The Council has already approved all of those conditions." Sarah nodded, then looked back out at the stars. Somewhere beyond the edge of the galaxy, ancient enemies were stirring, bringing with them technologies and intentions that could end everything she had ever known or loved. But perhaps, if she was willing to sacrifice her own humanity, she could give the galaxy a fighting chance. The activation was scheduled to begin in 18 hours. As Lyrana left her quarters, Sarah began to prepare herself mentally for a transformation that would either save the galaxy or destroy her in the attempt. The activation chamber hummed with power that seemed to resonate in Sarah's bones. She stood at its entrance, wearing a specialized biomonitoring suit that would track every aspect of her physiology during the transformation process. Around the chamber, dozens of the galaxy's most brilliant scientists worked at control stations, their faces tense with concentration and anxiety. Dr. Elena Vasquez approached with a final medical scanner. "Your neural patterns are optimal, Sarah. Heart rate elevated but stable. Are you ready for this?" Sarah looked around the laboratory one more time. Admiral Harrison stood at the military observation station, ready to coordinate defensive preparations based on whatever knowledge she might gain. Dr. Kethmore monitored the Zilani medical protocols that would hopefully help cure the plague ravaging their children. Representatives from 12 species watched from behind reinforced barriers, their civilization's hopes resting on what was about to happen. And there was Lyrana, standing at the empathic monitoring station where she would help guide Sarah's psychological state during the most critical phases of the activation. "As ready as anyone can be for something like this," Sarah replied. She stepped into the activation chamber, and immediately felt the strange crystalline surfaces respond to her presence. The intricate patterns began to glow more brightly, and she could swear she heard something that might have been music, though it seemed to come from inside her own mind rather than through her ears. "Initiating Phase 1, Elena announced. Quantum resonance generators online. Sarah, you should start feeling the preliminary neural interface connection now." The first sensation was like a gentle tingling in her fingertips that slowly spread up her arms. Then came something more profound, a sense of awareness expanding beyond the boundaries of her own body. She could feel the electronic systems throughout the station, the life signs of every being in the laboratory, even the distant gravitational pull of nearby stars. "Neural mapping at 30%, Dr. Kethmore reported. Genetic lock sequences responding to quantum stimulation." Sarah, Lyrana's voice came through the communication system. "I need you to focus on specific emotional memories now. Think about the first time you saw Earth from space, the moment you realized how beautiful and fragile our worlds really are." Sarah closed her eyes and let her mind drift back to that day 15 years ago when she'd been a young officer aboard her first starship. The image of Earth hanging in the void like a blue-white jewel had taken her breath away, and, for the first time she'd truly understood that every human being who had ever lived had called that single, precious planet home. "Genetic locks opening," Elena announced, excitement creeping into her voice. "We're seeing cascade activation across multiple chromosomes. Sarah, how are you feeling?" "Strange," Sarah replied, though her voice sounded different somehow, richer and more resonant. "Like I'm remembering things I never learned. There are patterns in my mind that feel familiar, but I know I've never seen them before." That's the genetic memory activation, Dr. Yexhai explained through harmonic vibrations. You're accessing knowledge that was encoded into your DNA millions of years ago. Suddenly, Sarah's awareness exploded outward. She could perceive not just the space station, but the entire star system, the quantum fluctuations that held matter together, the underlying mathematical structures that governed the behavior of reality itself. And, with that perception came knowledge, vast, overwhelming knowledge about technologies and capabilities that her human mind had never imagined possible. Phase 2 initiating, Elena reported. Full genetic activation in progress. Neural activity is off the charts, but patterns remain stable. I can see them, Sarah said, her voice now carrying harmonics that made every being in the laboratory stop what they were doing. The Devourers. They're not just approaching our galaxy, they're already here. They've been hiding in the void between stars, studying our civilizations, learning our weaknesses. Images flooded through her transformed consciousness. Vast ships that existed partially outside normal spacetime, entities that had consumed hundreds of galaxies over millions of years, technologies that could unravel the basic forces that held planets together. But, along with the terrifying visions came something else, knowledge of how to fight back. The first ones didn't just hide their technology, Sarah continued, her awareness now spanning multiple dimensions simultaneously. They prepared specific countermeasures. Every major world in our galaxy has dormant defense systems built into its geological structure, waiting for activation codes that only their inheritors could provide. Admiral Harrison leaned forward intently. What kind of defense systems? Planetary shields that can deflect stellar-level energy weapons. Gravity manipulators that can create artificial black holes. And something called the Unity Protocol, a way to link the consciousness of every willing being in the galaxy into a collective defensive network. Dr. Kethmore's voice was filled with hope. And the medical knowledge? Can you access healing techniques that could cure our children? Sarah's transformed perception turned toward the genetic patterns of the Zilani plague, and, suddenly, she could see it with perfect clarity, not just what it was, but why it existed and how it could be stopped. It's not a natural disease, she said, her voice heavy with new understanding. The plague is a bioweapon, deployed by Devourer Advanced Scouts as a test of our defensive capabilities. They're targeting the most empathically sensitive species first because they know those abilities are crucial for operating First One technology. The revelation sent shockwaves through the laboratory. If the Devourers were already actively attacking galactic civilization. But, I can cure it, Sarah continued. The knowledge is here, in my mind now. Not just how to heal the current plague, but how to immunize against future bioweapons. The first ones faced these exact same tactics millions of years ago. Activation at 90%, Elena reported. All genetic locks have opened. Sarah, you're showing capabilities that don't appear on any known biological charts. Because I'm not entirely biological anymore, Sarah replied. She opened her eyes, and everyone in the laboratory gasped. Her irises now contained swirling patterns of light that seemed to mirror the crystalline surfaces of the activation chamber. I can feel my consciousness extending across quantum dimensions. I can interface directly with any technology built on First One principles, and I can perceive threats across interstellar distances. Alarms suddenly began sounding throughout the station. Admiral Harrison rushed to his communication console as urgent reports poured in from across the galaxy. Admiral, came a panicked voice through the speakers. Deep space monitoring stations are detecting massive energy spikes throughout the outer rim. Whatever's been hiding out there, it's moving now. Fast. Sarah's transformed awareness reached out across the galaxy, and what she perceived made her blood run cold. Hundreds of Devourer ships were emerging from their hiding places, moving toward populated systems with technologies that could reach faster than light speeds that made human starships look like primitive sailing vessels. They know, she said quietly. The activation process generated quantum signatures that they recognized. They know the First One technology has been reawakened, and they're moving to destroy it before it can be fully deployed. How long do we have? Admiral Harrison demanded. 72 hours before their fastest ships reach the core worlds. Maybe less. The laboratory erupted in frantic activity as scientists and military personnel began implementing emergency protocols. But Sarah's attention was focused on something else, the vast network of dormant first-one defense systems that she could now perceive throughout the galaxy. "I need to get to the central command node," she said, stepping out of the activation chamber. Her movements now carried an unconscious grace that spoke of enhanced reflexes and spatial awareness. "There's a facility built into the quantum substrate of this star system that can coordinate defensive operations across the entire galaxy." "Where?" Elena asked. Sarah pointed toward what appeared to be empty space beyond the station's observation windows. "It's phased outside normal spacetime, but I can access it now." "But I'll need help. The activation process drained more energy than I anticipated, and I won't be operating at full capacity for several hours." Lirana approached cautiously. "What can we do to help?" "The medical knowledge first," Sarah replied, her transformed mind already processing the genetic sequences necessary to cure the Zilani plague. "I'm going to transmit the cure directly to Dr. Kethmore's research computers. But I'll need empathic support to maintain the precision necessary for such complex biological programming." She placed her hand on a nearby interface panel, and immediately streams of data began flowing through the station's computer networks. Complex genetic therapies, cellular regeneration techniques, and immunological protocols that represented millions of years of advanced medical research flooded into the Zilani medical databases. "Incredible," Dr. Kethmore whispered as he reviewed the incoming data. "This isn't just a cure for the plague, it's a complete medical revolution. These techniques could extend healthy lifespans for every known species by centuries." "That's just the beginning," Sarah said. She moved to another console and began accessing the station's communication systems, but instead of using normal controls, she interfaced with them directly through some kind of quantum consciousness link. "All Council worlds, this is Captain Sarah Chin of the Terran Federation, broadcasting on all emergency frequencies. I have critical information regarding an imminent threat to galactic civilization." Her enhanced awareness allowed her to simultaneously coordinate with hundreds of communication networks across dozens of star systems. Within minutes, she was in contact with military commanders, political leaders, and scientific institutions throughout the galaxy. "The beings we've detected on the outer rim are called Devourers," she continued. "They are an extragalactic species that has consumed hundreds of other galaxies over millions of years. They possess technology that can destroy entire star systems, and they are moving toward our core worlds as I speak." She paused as her consciousness reached out to touch the dormant defense networks that the first ones had hidden throughout the galaxy. "However, we are not defenseless. Ancient systems built by our predecessors can be activated to provide protection, but only through coordinated effort from every spacefaring civilization. I am transmitting activation codes and technical specifications to all Council worlds now." The next several hours passed in a blur of frantic preparation. Sarah's transformed capabilities allowed her to coordinate defensive operations across interstellar distances with an efficiency that no normal command structure could have achieved. Planetary defense grids that had been dormant for millions of years began coming online. Ancient shipyards hidden in asteroid fields and gas giant atmospheres started producing vessels built on first-one principles. And, throughout it all, Sarah maintained mental contact with Lirana, whose empathic abilities helped her stay anchored to her essential humanity even as her consciousness expanded across cosmic scales. "The first Devourer ships are entering the outer system now," Admiral Harrison reported. "Their technology is unlike anything we've ever seen. They're shielded against every known weapon system." "But not against first-one technology," Sarah replied. She had moved to the central command node, a facility that existed in a pocket dimension accessible only through quantum consciousness interface. From here, she could perceive and coordinate every defensive system in the galaxy simultaneously. "Activating Unity Protocol," she announced. "All beings who volunteer their participation, please follow the mental connection patterns I'm broadcasting now." Across the galaxy, billions of conscious beings felt a gentle touch in their minds, an invitation to join their awareness with Sarah's transformed consciousness and become part of a collective defensive network. The response was overwhelming. Humans, Zilani, Korva, Tharak, beings from species she had never heard of, all linking their minds together in a vast web of coordinated intelligence. Through this network, Sarah could perceive the approaching Devourer fleet with perfect clarity. Their ships were massive beyond description, built from technologies that existed partially outside normal physics. But she could also see their weaknesses, understand their attack patterns, and anticipate their strategies based on the genetic memories of first-won battles fought millions of years ago. All defensive systems, coordinate fire on my mark, she broadcast through the Unity protocol. Targeting solutions are being transmitted to all platforms now. When the Devourer ships entered the galaxy's defensive perimeter, they met resistance unlike anything they had encountered in millions of years of conquest. Planetary defense grids that could manipulate spacetime itself focused their fire on vulnerable points in the alien ship's defenses. Ancient weapons platforms emerged from hiding places in nebulae and asteroid fields, unleashing energies that could destabilize matter at the subatomic level. But, more than that, the Devourers faced something they had never encountered before, a galactic civilization unified in its determination to survive. Through the Unity protocol, every being in the galaxy contributed their unique capabilities to the defensive effort. Zilani healers worked to repair damaged systems faster than the attackers could destroy them. Thorak engineers provided massive computational power to solve targeting problems. Human tactical flexibility adapted strategies in real time as battle conditions changed. The battle raged for days, but gradually the tide turned in favor of the galaxy's defenders. Devourer ships that had seemed invulnerable began taking damage as first-won weapons found their weak points. The alien invaders' advantage in raw firepower was neutralized by superior coordination and tactics. And, through it all, Sarah maintained her role as the central coordinator, her transformed consciousness serving as the nexus point that allowed billions of beings to function as a single, unified entity while still retaining their individual identities and free will. When the last Devourer ship finally retreated toward the galactic edge, the celebration that erupted across thousands of worlds was unlike anything in recorded history. The galaxy had faced extinction and emerged not just victorious, but fundamentally changed. The Unity protocol had demonstrated that beings who chose to work together could achieve capabilities that exceeded anything possible through individual effort alone. But, for Sarah, the victory came with a profound sense of loss. The transformation process had left her changed in ways that could never be undone. She could perceive quantum dimensions and interface with technologies beyond imagination, but she could never again experience the simple human pleasures that had once brought her joy. It was Lirana who found her in the observation deck of Station Kepler 9, staring out at the stars with her transformed eyes that held swirling patterns of light. "You're not entirely human anymore," the young Zilani said gently. "But you're not entirely other, either. You're something new. Something that bridges the gap between what we were and what we could become." Sarah smiled, and, for a moment her eyes flickered back to their original brown color. "The children on your world, are they recovering?" "Completely healed," Lirana replied, tears of joy streaming down her translucent cheeks. "All of them. And, more than that, they're showing new abilities. Enhanced empathy, improved healing powers, resistance to diseases that have plagued our people for generations. The medical knowledge you provided didn't just cure the plague, it improved our entire species." "And the other worlds?" "The same. Everywhere the first-won medical techniques have been applied, beings are becoming healthier, stronger, more capable than they ever were before. Not transformed like you, but enhanced. Improved." Sarah nodded, understanding that this had always been the true purpose of the Return Protocol. Not just to create a few individuals with godlike capabilities, but to lift every species in the galaxy to new levels of potential. "Will you stay in contact with the Unity Protocol?" Lirana asked. "The network still needs a central coordinator, someone who can perceive threats and opportunities across galactic scales." "For as long as I'm needed," Sarah replied. "Though I suspect that over time, the network will become self-sustaining. Other beings will develop the capabilities necessary to serve as coordinators, and, eventually the galaxy won't need someone like me." She looked back out at the stars, her transformed perception showing her the quantum threads that connected every world, every life, every consciousness in their cosmic neighborhood. "But, until that day comes, I'll be here. Watching. Protecting. Making sure that what happened with the Devourers never happens again." Lirana moved to stand beside her, and, For a moment they simply watched the stars together, the young alien girl whose desperate question had started everything, and the human woman who had sacrificed her own species' identity to become something that could safeguard every species in the galaxy. In the weeks that followed, the story of Sarah's transformation spread throughout the galactic community, becoming the foundation for a new mythology that spoke of heroes willing to sacrifice everything for the greater good. But, more importantly, it became proof that when beings chose to work together, when they were willing to risk everything for each other's survival, there was no threat too great to overcome. The Unity Protocol remained active, a permanent network that allowed every willing consciousness in the galaxy to contribute to their collective security and prosperity. And, at its heart, Sarah Chin continued to serve as guardian and guide, no longer fully human, but representing the very best of what humanity could aspire to become. The Devourers would return eventually, creatures like that always did. But, when they came back, they would find a galaxy that was no longer a collection of separate, vulnerable civilizations. They would find a unified community of beings who would learn to combine their individual strengths into something greater than the sum of its parts. And they would find that sometimes, when the stakes are high enough, even the most unlikely heroes can rise to meet impossible challenges and emerge victorious.